When I first learned about the Egyptian pyramids in school, the story seemed simple. Ancient Egyptians built these massive structures as tombs for their pharaohs, using copper tools and wooden ramps. Thousands of workers dragged limestone blocks across the desert for decades. That was the official narrative we all grew up with. But here's the thing. The more you dig into the actual evidence, the more questions start piling up. And I'm not talking about wild conspiracy theories or alien intervention. I'm talking about legitimate archaeological puzzles that mainstream historians have struggled to explain for over a century. Let me take you through what we've been told, and more importantly, what we haven't been told. We've always heard that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 2560 BC during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. The standard story says it took 20 years to complete, with thousands of workers toiling away under the Egyptian sun. Do the math with me for a second. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. If we accept the 20-year construction timeline, that means workers had to quarry, transport, and precisely place one block every 2.5 minutes, working non-stop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 2 decades straight. Think about that. Every 2.5 minutes. No breaks, no holidays. Just constant perfect placement of massive stones, some weighing up to 80 tons. Engineers today scratch their heads at this timeline. Modern construction projects with advanced machinery, computers, and global supply chains regularly face delays and setbacks. Yet we're supposed to believe that ancient workers accomplished this engineering miracle without any of our technology, and they did it faster than we could today. Walk around the base of the Great Pyramid and measure it. The 4 sides are almost perfectly equal, with a margin of error of less than 2 inches across a base that spans 13 acres. The structure is also almost perfectly aligned with true north, off by only 3/60ths of a single degree. This level of precision required knowledge of mathematics and astronomy that supposedly didn't exist yet. We're talking about calculations that demand an understanding of the Earth's dimensions and celestial mechanics. The ancient Egyptians would have needed to know things about our planet that we assume they couldn't possibly have known. Inside the pyramid, the tolerances get even more impressive. The stones fit together so tightly that you cannot slide a razor blade between them in many places. No mortar was used in most areas, just raw stone cut and placed with jaw-dropping accuracy. Modern stonemasons who've studied these joints admit they would struggle to replicate this precision even with laser-guided cutting tools. We're expected to believe this was done with copper chisels and stone hammers. Here's where the official story really starts to fall apart. Copper tools were the hardest implements available to the ancient Egyptians, according to mainstream archaeology. The Bronze Age hadn't fully arrived, and iron was still centuries away. Copper is a soft metal. Try cutting granite with a copper saw and you'll quickly realize the problem. Granite is one of the hardest stones on Earth. Using copper tools to cut it would be like trying to slice through a steel beam with a butter knife. Yet the precision cuts we see on granite blocks throughout the pyramid complex show clean, straight lines and perfect right angles. Some granite boxes in nearby temples have been hollowed out with such precision that their internal corners form perfect 90-degree angles. Experiments by modern researchers trying to replicate these cuts with copper tools have failed spectacularly. The copper wears away faster than it cuts into the stone. Some researchers have proposed that the Egyptians used copper tools embedded with harder materials like corundum, but evidence for this technique remains thin. What's even more puzzling are the circular saw marks found on some stones, suggesting the use of rotary cutting tools. These marks show a depth and consistency that would require machinery, not hand tools. Let's talk about moving these stones. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons, but many weigh significantly more. The granite blocks in the King's Chamber weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. The official explanation involves wooden rollers, ramps, and massive teams of workers pulling on ropes. Sounds reasonable until you consider the details. The granite used in the King's Chamber came from quarries in Aswan, over 500 miles away. These 80-ton blocks somehow traveled that distance, then had to be lifted and maneuvered into place with millimeter precision, hundreds of feet above ground level. Engineers have tried to reconstruct the ramp systems that would have been necessary for this work. The problem is that a ramp tall enough and gradual enough to move these massive stones to the upper levels of the pyramid would have required more material than the pyramid itself. Where did all that ramp material go? Why haven't we found traces of these enormous structures? Some researchers propose internal ramp systems, but these theories have their own problems. The internal spaces of the pyramid don't show evidence of the large passageways that would have been necessary for moving blocks up and down inside the structure. Look closely at the Sphinx and the temples surrounding it. Geologists have pointed out something fascinating. The erosion patterns on these structures appear to have been caused by water, not wind and sand. Egypt has been a desert for thousands of years. The kind of sustained rainfall needed to create these erosion patterns would require a much wetter climate, one that existed in that region over 7,000 years ago, maybe even earlier. If true, this pushes the age of these monuments back thousands of years before the ancient Egyptians we know about. This challenges everything we've been taught about the timeline of human civilization. Mainstream Egyptologists have resisted this interpretation, but the geological evidence is hard to ignore. The erosion patterns are vertical and wave-like, consistent with heavy rainfall over extended periods, not the horizontal weathering you'd expect from wind-blown sand. The dimensions of the Great Pyramid encode mathematical relationships that seem too advanced for the time period. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2 times pi. This same structure, when you do the calculations, relates to the mathematical constant phi, also known as the golden ratio. Were these mathematical relationships intentional? If so, how did the builders know about these constants? Pi wasn't supposedly calculated accurately until much later in history, yet here it is, built into a structure that's over 4,000 years old. The pyramid's dimensions also relate to measurements of the Earth itself. The ratio between the pyramid's height and its base perimeter equals the ratio between the Earth's radius and its circumference. Coincidence? Maybe. But the coincidences keep piling up until they start looking like something else entirely. The academic establishment has a vested interest in maintaining the conventional narrative. Careers have been built on specific interpretations of Egyptian history. Admitting that we might be wrong about the pyramids would mean rewriting textbooks, reconsidering timelines, and acknowledging that ancient peoples might have been far more advanced than we've given them credit for. There's also the uncomfortable possibility that the pyramids weren't built by the civilization we call ancient Egypt at all. Perhaps they inherited these structures from an even earlier, unknown culture. This idea terrifies historians because it suggests massive gaps in our understanding of human history. I've noticed that researchers who question the mainstream narrative often face ridicule and professional marginalization. Every major breakthrough in human understanding came from someone willing to question what everyone else accepted as truth. Recent discoveries keep chipping away at the official story. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed cavities and chambers within the Great Pyramid that we can't access or explain. Thermal imaging shows temperature anomalies that suggest hidden passages or spaces with different properties than the surrounding stone. We've also found tool marks and construction techniques that don't match what we know about ancient Egyptian capabilities. Some cuts are too precise, some joints too perfect, some engineering solutions too sophisticated for the technology we believe they had. And let's not forget the complete absence of hieroglyphics or inscriptions inside the Great Pyramid itself. For a structure supposedly built as a pharaoh's tomb, there's remarkably little decoration or religious text. The only marking that attributes the pyramid to Khufu is disputed and may have been added later or even forged. I'm not here to tell you that aliens built the pyramids or that ancient Egyptians had computers. What I am saying is that the story we've been fed doesn't add up when you look at the actual evidence. The timeline is impossible with the technology we believe they had. The precision exceeds what we can do with modern tools. The logistics remain unexplained. The mathematics encoded in the structure suggests knowledge that shouldn't have existed yet. And the geological evidence hints at ages far older than we've been taught. We deserve honest answers to these questions. We deserve historians and archaeologists who are willing to say, "We don't know," instead of defending outdated theories that crumble under scrutiny. The pyramids stand as a testament to human achievement, but also as a reminder of how much we still don't understand about our own past. They did lie to us about the pyramids, not necessarily with malicious intent, but through oversimplification, institutional inertia, and an unwillingness to admit the limits of our knowledge. The truth is more mysterious, more fascinating, and more humbling than the neat story we learned in school.